Welcome to Hello Kind Soul Podcast, where we raise the vibration of kindness on a global scale. I'm Dr. Ebony Green, your host, and I'm super excited to be with you today. If you want to follow us on all major platforms, look us up at Hello Kind Soul Podcast. And if you want to follow me, look me up at eGreen Equity. I hope you enjoy the episode. Have a great day. Welcome to Hello Kind Soul Podcast. I am so excited to be in community with you today. I wanted to share a story to get us started today. And I was talking with someone, they were sharing a story about being in a car and they're driving and they were leaving a particular area and they put their GPS on, right? And you put in the address and they get in the car and the GPS tells them to go down the street and to go left. And there's a road to the right that goes straight. And they're following the GPS, and when they get to the place they're supposed to make a left, the GPS says, make a left. And the person driving thinks about, well, I would rather go straight as opposed to left. And so they go to the right to go straight to cut off traffic. And the person they almost cut off is like, no. And so they go ahead and they're driving and they get to an intersection where everyone's kind of stopped. And somehow the person's foot slips off the brake and it hits the car in front of them. And they were talking about, like, how they were like, well, how did this happen? Like, we were stopped. Why did you not pay attention? Right. And I started to think about that story, and it made me think about how often in our lives are we supposed to go a particular direction and we choose to go in the way and kind of have our way. Right. So instead of us doing the thing that we know we're supposed to do on the prescribed path, as it's clearly stated, we want to have our way. So we go another way. And going that other way ends up in an accident. And I think for me, when I think about it, so often I think about the things that I do, the decisions I make, and I try to follow the path with intentionality, right? But there are definitely times that I kind of have my way. And I think about what happens as a result often of kind of choosing to go in a different direction, even though you know that different direction may not lead you somewhere that you want to be, right? And what does that mean? What does that feel like? And then it made me start to think about in life in general, right? There's a general blueprint that I think is kind of laid out for us. And oftentimes we know which path we're supposed to take. But there are moments where we feel like, oh, I don't want to go that way. I'm going to go this way. And in retrospect, when you're thinking about whatever that decision was, oftentimes there's this level of like frustration that it didn't work out. And I wonder when we're making a decision to go off the track, right? Go off in a way that we know is not for us. When that happens, what leads us to make those decisions, right? Oftentimes when I've made decisions that I don't particularly like and I think about them later, it's because I know that I was making the decision with full knowledge that it was probably not the right decision. In fact, someone had reached out to me a little while ago and she was sharing how, like, what do you do when you know you're making a bad decision and you make it anyway, and then it ends up not ending up well. And then when you're reflecting on it, you really feel a level of sadness, right? And I think sometimes those are experiences that we're supposed to have, right? And I think there's value in a fall from grace, right? And so when I say a fall from grace, like sometimes we are so comfortable being in a particular spot that we stop being intentional about the decisions we're making. And so what typically opens our eyes is the fall from grace, right? The car accident example. There are so many times that what we do becomes routinized in our everyday behaviors that we no longer check in with ourselves if we're making the right decision. Are we going the right way? Are our feet in the right rooms, right? And so this idea of self-reflection is a theme that will continue to permeate through every conversation I have, because I think so often people will say, like, I don't have time to reflect. I don't have time to take care of myself. I don't have time to engage in a level of joy, whatever. And I hear you, but I might have said this last season, and if I didn't, I probably should have. Like, most of us are highly successful people in one way or another, right? I'm not talking about titles, but just in the way that we live our life. We accomplish tasks, we go to work, we support our families, right? The basic things that are really hard to do daily, we do. We don't miss a day. We don't forget to take care of it. We don't forget to make the meal, go to the appointment, whatever, send the email. But when it comes to us engaging in a practice that really allows us to think through who we were, who we are, and who we're becoming, we don't engage in that practice often enough to really move ourselves down the line, right? And I think ultimately what I'm trying to say is that when you don't, you crash the car, right? And for the purposes of being human, we are the car. So when we're thinking about what we have to do and how we have to move and how we continue to follow the path that we think is prescribed for us, it's to think about, have you taken out time from your day to really situate your life in context? Are you realizing that you are maybe trying to have your way a little bit too much as opposed to do the things that you know you've been intuitively led to do, right? And here's the thing with being intuitive that I think is a little challenging sometimes when you're not listening to yourself, right? Ego has a way of silencing probably the best choices you can make in life. Because ego is the one that's like, no, cut them off, crash the car, right? Like ego, if is not checked, can cause us multiple problems in our lives, right? And so when we're thinking about like, well, what does this mean for us? I would say that if we're not taking time to be self-reflective of what's happening in our life, we also can make many mistakes based on routinized behaviors that no longer serve us. So what I mean is there's something about us that often kind of taps us on the shoulder in terms of what we think or what we expect or how we feel about things that are happening to us and happening around us. But what I've recently learned about that is that when you follow the blueprint and you're clear about why you're walking in a particular direction, you're also very intuitively keyed into the directions that you're not supposed to walk in. In the context of my thought right now, it's the rooms you're not supposed to be in, right? And sometimes when we're not really reflective, we want to be in all the rooms, right? We want to be in all the places. We want to have that shine in all these ways. And some of those things are actually not good for your spirit, not good for you mentally, emotionally, and unfortunately, in some cases, physically, right? But I think oftentimes we get lost and we want to just kind of be everywhere. And so if we have a path that we know is meant for us, if we are faithful in that path is something that's going to lead us towards the better version of us, lead us towards creating greater change in the world, allow us to anchor ourselves in integrity and our core values, and you're not really thinking about how grounded or what you need to do to stay grounded in that direction, you can easily find yourself wanting to be in the company of fools. I'm going to say that again for the people in the back. You can easily end up wanting to be in the company of fools. And here's how I define fools. People that don't have your best interest at heart. And so sometimes our overzealous nature of wanting to be in the community of everyone, we haven't become discerning about what community means to us, number one. And two, we lose focus that we're not supposed to be in the company of everyone. And so not every opportunity is an opportunity that actually benefits you. Some opportunities are there to distract you, right? And so the whole reason I started off with that story is because I genuinely felt like there's a moment where we have an opportunity to really think about, am I going down the right path and doing the right things that I think bring value and allows me to care deeply about people? Or am I hyper fixated on being affirmed or in the community of the wrong people? Because those wrong people, in some regard, can bring a problem to your door, right? And sometimes it's the problem of being affiliated to the wrong people. Sometimes it's the problem of being in the wrong rooms with the wrong ideas or the wrong ideals. And that becomes a reflection of who you are and what you stand for, even if that's not who you are and what you stand for. So being able to be discerning is important, right? And let's say, right, that the GPS isn't always correct. Now, I am going to say that it's a program that's created and will absolutely get you home. But sometimes the GPS will reroute you to a route that you don't necessarily like, but it will reroute you because that's the safer avenue to take. So you have to be also open to being redirected, which I don't think is what happened in that story, right? Like, if you're making a left and that's not the typical way you go, and yes, you may be comfortable going straight, you're like, okay, I'm just going to take this road and go straight, but you're being rerouted to sometimes, metaphorically, a better place, a higher purpose, right? A place with more vision, a place that you would fit better, a community that's really caring and loves you, right? You have to be open to being rerouted or rerouted. Excuse me. So oftentimes when we think about this, there's so many things that we can get from this notion of a GPS, because had that person made the left, they would have never gotten a car accident. And to me, a car accident is kind of a symbol of anything that happens that you don't want to happen or happens is not good for you. But the piece is that, are you flexible to the changes in your life that may occur as a result of you being rerouted in another direction to help you avoid the problems that you would avoid, i.e. the accident, right? And so all of this is under this idea of really thinking about that there's a higher power in the world, right? That you believe in some way, shape, or form shapes where we go and what we do, right? And so if that is something you believe in, right? If you believe in God, if you believe in source, universe, whatever, we are aware that there is something beyond us that helps guide us through this thing called life. And we can acknowledge that not everything we do necessarily is bad if we have our way, because there are times where we're given options of things that aren't necessarily good for us, but we make a better decision. But we can agree that there are multiple times that I've been told no, i.e. rerouted, and that no has been so important for the success of me moving forward in life, right? Many of us have had opportunities, people, jobs, right? You apply for a job, they tell you no, you're in a relationship, it ends, right? We all look at it like, oh, this is awful. And then in hindsight, you're like, thank goodness. This was me being rerouted in a different direction. And so I also want to kind of encourage people out there is to sometimes welcome the fact that you're being rerouted, and don't always be so hyper fixated on having your way, because sometimes having your way is not God's way, is not the way, and will end you up in a place you don't particularly want to go. And so then that's usually when we get the clarity to say, oh, I can't believe I did this and I knew I should have done that, but I thought that was probably a better thought, right? And that's where the ego comes in. Because I think, as I said before, I think a lot of us spend a lot of time thinking about what we want to do, but when we're thinking about that, it's filtered through this ego that wants to be seen and heard in ways that aren't necessarily always good. There's a belief system within that frame of ego that says, I just know more than everybody else, so I'm going to just keep doing it my way. And that can absolutely lead you to a place you don't want to go. And so 3 things, folks, I think I want you to think about. When can you recall a time in your life that you tried to make a decision that you knew was not the decision you should make, and what happened as a result of making that decision, right? 1. 2, what were your thoughts and your mindset when you then realized that that decision was not something you wanted to, that you shouldn't have made, but you made it anyway? What was the feeling you got when whatever happened? And 3, how often have you tried your best to kind of follow the path that you think has been aligned for you? And while that path is not without holes in the road or without bumps, it's gotten you exactly or further than you thought you would get following the path that someone laid out for you, right? I say those things because I think there is this beautiful space that we have between trying to have our way and trying to be mindful that there's a path. And while even in the path that we're following, there are also places where we can kind of jump off to explore and be curious about different parts of our life while still staying on brand, on in the right direction, on with your mind full. Like, I guess my point is, like, knowing full well that there are things that we want to do that are on a path, and we're going to go down that path. But even in that, you're going to have distractions and places to be curious about. But overall, that path is going to lead you to a place that you respect, that you're really proud of, that you're excited you arrived at. And if you don't take the time to be faithful to the journey that's set out for you, you can in fact be distracted or derailed from your greater purpose, right? And that's the piece that I want you to sit with and really think through, because those 3 questions I gave you a little earlier will help you kind of think about, oh, I did this and this happened. I did this and that happened. And then think about like, okay, in those moments, how often did you know one was a better choice than the other? And what was the reason you didn't take the better choice, right? And I feel like when I was younger, I was more more likely to kind of engage in risky stuff, right? And not like bad risky, but just like speeding or whatever, right? And then you get older and you understand this sense of mortality, and you're like, wait a minute, I'm older now, and like I don't have time to heal, to engage in these things that could potentially bring harm to my door, mentally or physically. And so you're less likely to engage in risky stuff, right? You're more risk averse. But overall, I think when we're thinking about the decisions we make, yes, we may know something's right or know something's wrong. I don't know if it's always just a yes or a no or a right or wrong. Sometimes there's a ton of gray in the middle, and we have to kind of sit in there and think about it. But I will say, you don't want your feet to be in rooms you're not supposed to be. And I also can say that your mail will never be delivered to the wrong house. So anything that's for you won't miss you. And even if it doesn't come to you when you think it should come to you, there are many times that I've been denied. And then later, the same person has circled back and asked for something, or the same situation or a better situation will come back 5 months later. I'm like, oh, I'm so glad that didn't happen before and it happened now. So I will also say, like, when you're thinking about what you're going to do and how you're moving forward, it's like, just as I said before, don't entertain the company of fools. If people don't uphold the values you have, and you're very much rooted in your values and the importance of them, you get to choose whether you're going to, stay on the path that you're on to do the things you want to do, accomplish the things you want to accomplish, or you're going to go and have your way. And if you're going to have your way and you're in the company of fools, just know that sometimes those outcomes are counter to the outcomes you're hoping to create, and that ultimately you get to decide. But the question begs, if you don't get to where you're going, are you able to really sit in the disappointment, because you can recognize that part of the disappointment is because of the way, the role that I played in my life or the way that I'm showing up. But you rarely can have your way, not end up in the place you want to be, and then blame other people for that, right? And so other than self-reflection, self-accountability is really, really important for us to be willing and able to really think about and kind of reflect on, right? What part do I play in the things that are happening? Did I try to have my way and go straight instead of make the left? As a result, could I have done something different that would have ended in a different result? None of us ever really know, right? We'll just hypothesize. But from that particular example, in my mind, I was like, the GPS said go left, you go straight, and then here's what happens. So I'm wondering, how do we stay true to the path that's been set out for us? More importantly, how do we stay true to the vision we have for us? And how do we make sure that we're able to use discernment to figure out what's real and what's not, and be more discerning so that we don't end up in the company of fools? I hope that was helpful today. I hope you have an amazing day, kind soul, and I will see you next week. Take care.